Know that I'm a fan of the writer, poet, novelist, essayist Wendell Berry. And Berry has been one that has, over the last 20 years or so or more, has formed my consciousness around issues of creation care, stewardship. Interestingly, Berry is what I would call a reluctant Christian. He will tell you that he's Christianity is his native tradition, and it's what he was raised with and how he thinks. And I think he would probably say for better and for worse. It's hardly a ringing endorsement. But over his career, Barry has spoken a number of times to seminary classes, particularly to seminaries in the Baptist tradition, um, back in the days when Southern Baptist seminaries would actually have somebody like Wendell Berry speak there. And that's actually been a while since they've been willing to do that. But Berry, in his writings and his poetry and all of his essays, has talked about what he calls the unfortunate schism that he experienced in Southern religion. And I want to read a little bit of what he says about that. He talks about the religion of the South that he grew up in. He's from Kentucky. Promoted and fed on a destructive schism between body and soul, heaven and earth. It has encouraged people to believe that the world is of no importance and that their only obligation in it is to submit to certain churchly formula to get into heaven. And so people who might have been expected to care most selflessly for the world have had their minds turned elsewhere to a pursuit of salvation that was really only another form of gluttony and self-love, the desire to perpetuate their lives beyond the life of this world. And this notion of the creation itself in some way having less value than the spirit or the soul, the transcendent being more important than the particular in the present, has been a long, difficult struggle within Christianity. Just this last Sunday, Dean Paul talked about Gnosticism, which is the original Christian heresy that the important thing Gnostic said was for us to transcend our physicality, our earthiness, for us to get out of this body and this earthy reality and elevate ourselves into some sort of ethereal spiritual realm. And Barry has argued that this is what has corrupted Christianity and made it far too frequent that Christians appear to care very little about the actual stewardship of creation. But he argues this is not what you find in the Bible. Quite the contrary. And I want to go through a few of these things as quickly as possible because it's such a rich collection of material, particularly when he's dealing with the Torah. We'll look at the New Testament next week. To say that he's absolutely correct, that the Bible is what he calls a book that's open to the sky. It's open to the created order. You go to Genesis 1 and the creation narrative, and what does God say over and over and over again in the creation narrative? It's good. He saw this created and it's good. And then in the wonderful translation of the Common English Bible, at the end, after saying it's good in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 verses, he says, God saw everything he had made and it was supremely good. So God sees creation as something that's supremely good. Barry calls God a great relisher of his world. It's good, grown immortal in his mind. He reminds us in John 3:16 when he says God so loved the world, he's not just talking about people, he's talking about the whole created order, everything that God has made. God views the created order as something profoundly good, not as the Gnostics did, something that's evil that you need to escape, but something that is profoundly good. And Israel, in its historical experience, uh, was a profound, earthy, embodied, deeply connected to creation. The problematic views of sexuality that we have in Christianity weren't something we got from our Jewish forebears. The problematic ideas we have about the concrete reality of the earth is not something we got from our Jewish forebears. Judaism has always been a very earthy religion, a very earthy tradition. We got that from somewhere else, the idea that we're disconnected from the earth. Judaism is about how you plant and how you sow and how you raise animals, what you eat, what you don't eat, how you have sex. Everything is very concrete and particular. And Christianity, unfortunately, took much that was concrete and particular and made it abstract and deracinated. So Barry makes a contrast then between the way the Israelites moved into Canaan and the way the Europeans colonized the United States. When the Israelites moved into Canaan, they were told explicitly that they were immigrants and foreigners and that the land belonged to God. It wasn't theirs. It belonged to God. And there were many, many ways in which Torah underscored the fact that the land was not theirs, it belonged to God. Um, I'll say a little bit more about this in a minute, but that the land belonged to God meant that God had ideas about how the land was to be cared for. And throughout Torah, there are commandments that are like this. In Deuteronomy 22, if you come up on a nest with eggs in it, you are told that you can take the eggs, but that you can't kill the mother bird. Now, why? Because you don't destroy the source of your own survival. If you kill the mother bird, she's not going to have any more eggs, right? They're going to be, it's literally killing the goose that laid the golden egg. And so caring for, not fouling your own nest, not caring for the sources of your own sustenance, not destroying what enables you to live. You have commandments like this throughout the Torah. And Barry calls this a perfect paradigm of ecological and agricultural responsibility. You preserve seed from one year to the next. You don't eat everything. You don't destroy everything. There is a clear sense of responsibility for stewardship within Torah. Furthermore, you know that within Leviticus 25, for example, the land gets its Sabbath. The land has to lie fallow. You can't constantly use it to exhaust the soil. And we have gotten ourselves into a situation in this country where we are so heavily dependent upon chemical fertilizers that our soil has become less and less and less productive, particularly in certain parts of the Midwest. We do not have a divine mandate to exploit, but a divine mandate in the Torah to use the world, to use the land justly and carefully and well. So there is no the exploitation of the land or animals. There's instructions about how you care for animals as well. This is very prominent throughout the Old Testament. And then there's the Jubilee that every 50 years, land is supposed to revert to the original owners. Now, why was this the case? Well, you think about what happens in situations where there is um, more and more land in the hands of fewer and fewer people. It is much more likely that the land gets exploited, it gets damaged. It's much more likely that you have people that are impoverished. Um, in the book of Isaiah, there's a famous passage where Isaiah says, "Woe to people who add house to house and field to field until they live alone in the land." Uh, and the problem in the latter years of the kingdom of Israel, like many kingdoms and empires, was that the land was getting into the hands of fewer and fewer people, and a landed elite was dominating, and an increasingly impoverished peasantry was starving. And so the prophets are denouncing this. Think of the story of Ahab, who wants a vineyard of a man named Naboth, and Naboth says, "No, this is my family inheritance. I can't give you this vineyard. I can't sell it to you." And Ahab goes back to the palace and pouts until Jezebel says, "Hey, I can take care of that." Uh, so eventually, Naboth is accused of blasphemy, is executed, and Ahab takes possession of the vineyard. And this is a narrative about, the power of an imperial force to gain more and more power. And there's another story about this that you may not have thought of, and this is the story of Joseph. Um, Joseph, you remember, he becomes the right hand man of Pharaoh because of this coming famine. And so he piles up all the grain in the good years, and then the lean years come, and they come to him and they say, we don't have any food, and so sell us grain. So he sells them grain. And then the next year there's a poor harvest, and they come back and they say, well, uh, we we don't have any food and we're out of money. So what can we do? And well, we'll give you our livestock, and then when you get the livestock, we can get food. So they give him the livestock, and so they get food. And the next year they say, we still don't have any money. We don't have any livestock, or we're starving. What are we going to do? Well, we'll give you our land. And so they give him all the land. And so now Pharaoh has all the livestock, all the land, and all the money. And then finally, they say, hey, we admit we don't have anything. We'll just give you ourselves as slaves. So this is really a model of how an imperial force can end up enslaving a people by possessing all the land. And the Torah technically says you can't do that. You've got to, it needs to revert to its original ownership. And however one understands the practicalities of that, that is a way of preserving the ownership of smaller groups of people as opposed to a larger corporate or imperial force, with the view that these people are going to give it proper care. So there is profound agricultural, ecological, and political reasoning in the Old Testament to ensure the preservation of the land as God's gift and God's responsibility. At the end of Isaiah, the prophet, after confronting the power of the various rulers and empires that were impinging upon the people of God, talks about what he foresees in the future for God's people and for God's world. And this is from Isaiah 65, verse 17. Look, I'm creating a new heaven and a new earth. Past events won't be remembered. They won't come to mind. Be glad and rejoice forever, for what I'm creating, and in what I'm creating, because I'm creating Jerusalem as a joy and her people as a source of gladness. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad about my people, the ones who will, no one will ever hear the sound of weeping or crying in it again. No one, no more will babies live only a few days, or the old fail to live out their days. The one who dies at 100 will be like a young person, and the one falling short of 100 will seem cursed. They will build houses and live in them. They will plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They won't build for others to live in or plant for others to eat. Like the days of a tree will be the life days of my people. My chosen will make full use of their handiwork. They won't labor in vain, nor bear children in a world of horrors, because they will be people blessed by the Lord, uh, they along with their descendants. Before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear. Wolf and lamb will graze together. The lion will eat straw like the ox, but the snake, its food will be dust. They won't hurt or destroy in any place on my holy mountain, says the Lord. The point of this is to say that the Old Testament understands the destiny of God's people as an earthy destiny. And next week, when we talk about the New Testament, we'll suggest that when Jesus talks about the kingdom of God, he is talking about this earthly destiny of the new king, of the new heavens and the new earth, where God's people have a stewardship responsibility for the creation, and where the creation is productive and healthy and whole. And that as we live into the kingdom values, that value of creation care, of sustaining the health of creation, is one of the things that we live toward as God's people. It's not a minor part of it, it's a central part of it, it's a critical part of it. Uh, I used to say to students all the time, we do not anticipate a disembodied life in heaven. We anticipate the new heavens and the new earth, uh, a concrete, particular earthy existence. And in our lives today, we live toward that. And so by sustaining the life of the creation, we are doing the work of God. We are doing kingdom work. But this is going to require us getting over that, what I said at the beginning, that historic Gnosticism, which separates heaven and earth, which separates body and soul, which does not connect us profoundly to the particular, but keeps us in the grasp of the abstract. Okay, what are my questions that I have for you? I think they're pretty simple. The first one is, what does it mean to be a steward? If we are stewards of creation, what does that mean? Secondly, what is the difference between wise use and exploitation? What is the difference between wise use and exploitation? And thirdly, what is one thing that you do to be a wise steward? Okay, what does it mean to be a steward? What's the difference between wise use and exploitation? And what is one thing that you do to be a wise steward? Okay. Mary, you're